Hey everyone, Mr. Chicken Movies here, and welcome to the top 5 worst Third Doctor stories out there. Now, this is a sequel to my top 5 best Third Doctor stories out there. This is part of a much greater Doctor Who series, link up above. But as I stated in that first video, the Third Doctor era is remarkably consistent on a quality level, which means that finding 5 stories I disliked in the Third Doctor, despite the amount of time he did it for, was actually quite difficult. In the end, I could only find like 4.5 stories that I properly dislike out of the whole Third Doctor era, which is honestly one of the better ratios out there. And so subsequently, I'm not going to do any honourable mentions for this series. But this is all my own opinion, take it with a grain of salt. And let me know down in the comments below what your least favourite Third Doctor stories out there are, and what your thoughts on the whole of his era are. There will of course be spoilers ahead, so spoilers for the whole Third Doctor era up ahead, and yeah, hope you guys enjoy the video. Let's get into it. At number 5, we have a story that isn't so much bad, but just very disappointing, and that is the Monster of Paladin. And the main reason that it's here is because it's a sequel to the Curse of Paladin, a story which made it onto the honourable mentions of my top 5 best of the Third Doctor list. And honestly, this is a sequel that no one really wanted. Half the characters from the original Curse of Paladin aren't even here. And really, just seeing a lot of these elements done again, it just feels like a rerun of Curse of Paladin, except for everything that was cool about Curse of Paladin we've seen before. There isn't anything as cool as the Ice Warriors twist that we get in the Curse of Paladin here. Instead, it's just filled with a rather dull plot that just feels like a runaround of stuff that we liked in Curse. This is 6 parts long, which just made it feel way too slow. It did not need to be 6 parts, and because of that, it's actually really boring at some point. And unfortunately, because it's got such a dull plot, some very mediocre direction, and some pretty bad acting at some points, it just makes the whole journey feel like a bit of a slog. But mainly, it's just uninspired. There's really nothing about this story that pops out to me. I really enjoyed the Curse of Paladin, but in this story, it really sapped away a lot of the life that was in that Curse of Paladin story and replaced it with something that just wasn't interesting. If I could use one word to describe this story, it would be uninspired. Up next, we have The Mutants, and this is going to be a really difficult story to criticize, because this story is kind of just nothing. The plot is ridiculously drawn out over 6 parts, and to be honest, it has the plot of about 3, maybe 4 at a stretch, so the extra 2 parts just make this a complete slog to get through. Most of the plot lines present here are fairly uninteresting, and all of the characters in this one are pretty dull. Even the direction's quite mediocre in this story. But ultimately, there's just nothing to care about this story. It doesn't really have anything to say exactly. Its pacing is incredibly slow. The actual mutants themselves look cool. They've got pretty good designs and the makeup on them is alright, but the problem is we don't care about any of the people involved in this situation. They're all really unlikable or just empty shells of characters that aren't really worth caring about. Which means we're subjected to basically 6 parts of characters bickering with each other over things that ultimately don't matter, and eventually we'll see an android or a mutant, but it's so few and far between that I just don't really care. Some good production design, some good makeup and effect, but the plot just lets this one down. At number 3, we have The Ambassadors of Death, and this story is painfully slow. The pacing is very flat, and the characters in this one are really uninteresting. The concept of the villains is actually really good. Those villain creature things, they actually have some really good scenes and add some tense moments to the story, but the whole plot is very uninspiring. Some of the tension, like I said, is good. Some of the directing is even good, but it's so drawn out that this story is a complete slog to get through. It's 7 parts for crying out loud, and I don't think it justifies even 4. Granted, there are some good moments here and there, you know, the Brigadier and Liz and the Doctor, they're all fun to watch, but all the side characters, forgettable. Even the villains to some extent, other than their visuals, their motives or whatever, forgettable. The story, forgettable. Ultimately, this story is just completely forgettable. This story is utterly humorless, which makes the experience just, again, a slog to get through. It feels very cold in terms of its tone, which doesn't work well because it just feels very pedestrian level. There's no charm to this story, and it's so padded out that this story just, it doesn't justify itself in 7 parts. It's built around the gimmick of these weird colour things, which they could obviously only do in this season, but it was built, by the looks of things, for a Troughton season. So ultimately it doesn't fit in either era. It takes up 7 whole episodes, and let's be honest, is kind of a complete waste. This is just utterly dry. At number 2 we have the big return of the Daleks, and there are 3 of them! Day of the Daleks has so much potential and almost all of it is wasted. Really, this isn't a bad story, it's just an incredibly disappointing one. For the big return of the Daleks, it just doesn't work. For starters, there are 3 of them, and their voices sound, well, terrible. They also just feel really tacked onto the plot, like they were a last-minute inclusion. This really is more of an Ogron story than it is a Dalek story, which is bizarre to say the least. And subsequently, they have done special editions and fixed the Daleks' voices, they've done some special effects to make the story look better, but those old effects really didn't hold up well, and you still have to acknowledge they did get the Dalek voices wrong, and there were only 3 of them in the story. But being completely honest, the Daleks don't even have anything too memorable to do in this story. I also don't agree with the idea of them using the Ogrons as they do. I feel like the Daleks are very much creatures that do their own thing. And because of that, there's certain elements that don't work. A lot of the pacing feels quite drawn out at points as well, which I don't agree. I think the storytelling in this story is also bizarre at some points. I'm guessing this is due to some last-minute rewrites that probably added in the Daleks, but yeah, the story was just very disappointing. The plot has some cool elements in it. I like the ideas of the Daleks doing a Terminator-style idea where they go back to try and secure their own future, but in execution it's screwed over. The Ogrons I feel like are in this way too much for the Daleks to get enough of the limelight, and yeah, in execution this story just didn't work out great. There's some good stuff with Unit in this story, there's some pretty good dialogue. I actually like what they do with 3 a lot in this story, and I guess it's cool seeing the Daleks back again, but they do absolutely nothing, and they're handled badly. So because of that, due to basically it screwing around with the Daleks, which I didn't like, and as well as that, it's just a bit slow, it's just a bit weird in terms of its story. Day of the Daleks is the 2nd worst 3rd Doctor story. I get a sense I'm going to get a lot of hate for this one. And the worst 3rd Doctor story is The Time Monster. And I think saying The Time Monster is probably all it really takes. It's a bit of a weird sounding title, to say the least. And basically this story boils down into being a pantomime. It's way too campy in terms of its premise and its plotting for me to take the story seriously. Which leaves it with a certain just lack of tension. And there's also a huge lack of action in this story. Its pacing is incredibly slow. So because of that, it's kind of just walking around, talking to people, and explaining the plot to us. It's just not very good storytelling. The ideas it presents here are, of course, very far-fetched. And they're also quite generic in terms of what stories they have to tell. This story kind of feels like 2 jammed together, and one of them's your traditional Unit thing, the other is like a pantomime from the 1st Doctor era. This just doesn't work on a writing level. The direction is really bad in this story, and some of the acting isn't great either. The plot just takes stark turns at random as well, and ultimately the story ends just feeling very unsatisfying. The Master is in it, and I guess he has some good moments with the Third Doctor, but his plans are foiled way too easily this time round. Instead, the villain isn't the Master, it isn't even the Time Monster. Speaking of which, I forgot to mention, the effects in this are actually kind of hilarious at points. So yeah, the Time Monster's kind of just a boring pantomime. Don't take any of it seriously, because no one else here really did. It's badly directed, it's badly written, it's badly paced, and it's badly acted. I realistically don't want to watch this episode again unless I am looking for it in a so bad it's good manner. So if you like that sort of camp, then be my guest, but for me, I do not. And for that reason, the Time Monster is the worst story in the Third Doctor era. But that's all in my opinion at least, so let me know down in the comments below what your thoughts are, what your least favourite, what your favourite, what your rankings of the Third Doctor era are. Special thanks to Veritasium UK for the amazing Doctor Who story trailers that I've been using as footage in each of these videos. Please check out his trailers on Classic Doctor Who and New Who as well. And of course, thanks to you guys for watching this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, be sure to subscribe, like and comment. But for the time being, I'm Mr. Chicken Movies. I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.